Hello, and welcome to session 5 of Messages from Beyond. I'm Shannon Grace, and I just keep having the feeling that there's more wanting to be shared, and there's more messages to be shared, and there's more people that would like to be heard. So it's here I am again, and I'm excited to be here. And I don't know if this is what will come through today or not. I have a feeling it might be, but there is something that's on my mind. So whether what's on my mind will then come through to be discussed or not, only time will tell. We will soon see. But what's on my mind is that I'm just sensing and noticing a lot of rising tensions within Canada, and it's kind of it's quite widespread right now, and there's just groups of people that aren't getting along, and there's groups of people who are making loud statements, and there's groups of people that are being affected either directly or indirectly by these statements or by these actions. And for me, like the political isn't what I focus on. The economic isn't what I focus on. The human is what I focus on, and the dynamics of the humans, and the past of the humans, and the emotions of the humans, and the ancestral connections of today's humans to past humans. So I'm all about the human parts of what is going on in any situation, really, like whether it's me at home, or whether it's something publicly that's happening, whether it's something in the news, whether it's like something to do with politics, whether it's something to do with the economy, like something to do with money, something to do with business, everything for me, like I just like the way I interpret things, or the direction I go with things, is to the human, interpersonal, but also like personal dynamics, or the history of it, or the unresolved emotional trauma and pain and unresolved stuff that must be going on, that is causing all of this tension and frustration and all of these actions and words and actions between people or groups of people that happen. And so I became aware several years ago now about the effects of intergenerational trauma. And so what that means is that something that happens to someone at one point in time, if they're not able to fully heal and fully resolve and find peace with whatever that was that happened to them in their lifetime, the trauma lives on in their descendants. And like, I know for me, like there's been, over the years, there's been so many things that I've learned and that I've worked through that go back and back and back and back and back. And sometimes we, like the person that it starts with, or the person that has the trauma, like was a part of our life at some time, or our parents remember them, or our grandparents remember them and can share their story. and their experience. So then we have an awareness when that same type of pattern shows up for us in our life. It's almost like, oh, well, I'm experiencing this pattern, or I'm reacting in a very hypersensitive way to this particular experience, but my grandma also had that. Or I remember my grandma saying her grandma had an experience that this is what happened, and then after that she became hypersensitive to the same thing that I'm hypersensitive to. Or she had, like, she was traumatized by different circumstances, but the same type of trauma that I'm experiencing or that I'm feeling today in my own life. And so that's how I best describe intergenerational trauma, is that, like, at some time in our family's history, people or family members experience trauma and or pain, or like not good stuff, like very traumatic things, and they weren't able to fully heal from those in their own lifetime, and future generations feel the effects, or they actually carry the trauma, but it's not consciously. It's just that, like, they're carrying the wounds, they're carrying the trauma, they're carrying the pain, they're carrying like the PTSD, or they're carrying the reactions, they're carrying the sensitiveness to certain things in their own life that is totally magnified and like intensified because of their family history, past trauma that never got healed and never got resolved, and amends were not made for it, and they were not at peace with what happened in their own life. And so often when one generation, so let's say great grandma and grandpa, experienced horrendous things, then either there were already children who experienced it with them, or who felt, or children came after, but those children felt the effects of what happened to their parents, because if their parents were still mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically wounded, or mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually affected by what happened to them even before the children were born, the children are still experiencing the effects of that, because trauma changes people, and pain changes people, and wounds change people. And so then the first offspring are directly affected, in my opinion. They are directly affected, or they could be directly affected by the trauma that their parents experienced in their lifetime, but then it affects how the parents are able to be in their own life as they're raising their children, which then means, like, from a more practical standpoint, then the children grow up and they've experienced certain things because of their parents' wounds and traumas, but now it's like they're struggling in their own life, or they have kind of like they have a hill to climb in their own life because of how their childhood was, which then affects their ability to have like healthy, happy, safe, nurturing environments for their own children. And then it continues. And so whether it's a culture of people, a community of people, a family of people, a province of people, a country of people, like, it just depends on what the trauma is, and it depends on how big the trauma was, and it depends on like how many people were affected and how were they affected by the trauma. Because truthfully, human history has been a bit of a gong show, and human history has been messy, and human history has been very... I have a lot of words coming right now, but I'm just looking for a word that kind of sums up all the words. It's been brutal. It's been ugly. It's been malicious. It's been... like, I just keep getting like graphic. Like it like the things that went on in front of women and children, and like, were very graphic, but not in video games, like in a real way. Like I was I was watching a show with my daughter on HGTV. So it was an HGTV show the other day. And there was a family that had come from they were refugees from a country in Africa. And the community was building them a home or something like that. Like the show was about them, and like HGTV is all about renos and homes and whatever. So like, it was a feel-good story about this family. But the fellow talked about how, like, when he was a kid, him and his dad, like, his dad was like a farmer, and he would go out and farm with his dad, and like, or garden. They were gardeners, I think, maybe he said. I don't know. Anyway, farmers or gardeners. But then a war broke out in their country, and he said, like, one day he witnessed his mom, dad, and little sister be killed. And him and two of his sisters fled and ran and hid. And I don't even know how long they were out, like, that they were just in hiding, and they were out kind of just like running from the soldiers before they somehow stumbled upon a refugee camp. And they were in the refugee camp living in, I can only imagine what kind of conditions, for 3 years before they came to America. And so I just, like, in my mind, it's like, I can't even imagine. And now they're in America trying to live a normal life. But in my mind, it's like, I can't even imagine physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually how people can go through something like that and witness something like that and not be traumatized in some way by it. And so that is an extreme case, but a less extreme case, as an example, would be a death in the family, or an accident in the family, where something tragic happens or something traumatizing happens within a family, and the effects that it has on that family, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Again, it's like, trauma has effects on people. And yeah, you kind of look at the thousands of people that experience the millions of people sometimes that experience horrendous things in a war-torn country. But then you also look, like, within the family unit, and you look at tragedies and traumas that happen in one family even, and it all has the potential to cause intergenerational trauma if the trauma from those people that experience those tragedies is not healed, fully healed, and not fully resolved, and not like fully come to peace with in their own lifetime. And also with the people who are in their life, like children, like other relatives, like different family members that are connected to them during their lifetime that they experience the trauma in. So, you know, when I started to like, it just makes me like, oh God, the piles are so big. But when I started to have these realizations and I started to see, like, I started to get an understanding of how many generations have lived and died without having the skills or having the knowledge or having the ability, for whatever reason, without having the ability to fully heal their wounds and their traumas. It feels like a really big pile to me, where if that pile of trauma was like rocks or pebbles, I feel like it would be a massive, 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 massive mountain, or multiple massive mountains of trauma pebbles that people have left behind throughout we're talking throughout human history here, right? Because like we all come from someone that came from someone that came from someone, and the line goes on forever, pretty much, for like however many thousands of years that people have been living on this planet. It's kind of staggering. Like it is kind of staggering. However, luckily for me, luckily for us, they're not physical pebbles. They're energetic pebbles. And energy, you can deal with a whole bunch of energy all at the same time, because we don't have to physically sit in a room with everyone who's carrying a trauma pebble. When you work energetically, you can connect and invite and connect to like a gazillion people at a time who are carrying a trauma pebble. And whoever has the desire, whoever is on the energetic side or in the energy realm, who has the desire to let go of their trauma pebble, or I feel like once you cross over and you go through the golden light, you're not carrying it anymore, but you have an awareness of what you've left behind. And so my awareness is that I like to help people who have passed through onto the other side to energetically resolve their trauma pebbles. And that is something that that was actually the first waves of people that started getting my attention, was like cultures of people who culturally had gone through horrible traumas in their lifetime, which is now human history, of war and battles and oppression and slavery and just like a lot of the darker sides of human history. And those people were the first groups of people that my awareness became aware of. And they were asking for help to release their emotional, well, it was emotional, but to release their energetic trauma. And a lot of it was emotional. So I've been very connected to and very aware of trauma and emotional trauma, and how emotions are trauma, and energy trauma, and intergenerational trauma, and all the pebbles. So that's just like, that's what's on my mind today. And linking in with some tension between different people and different groups within Canada right now. And so I just wanted to, like, I don't even know, I see a bit of a standoff right now between the First Nations people of Canada and the European descendants. Not the descendants, but the European people that came to Canada. Like, that is what I'm seeing right now. And those are the groups of people that I am referencing with the tension that's happening now. But I just, from a human dynamics standpoint, I'm very aware that what is happening today is 100% connected to and pertaining to and related to, like related in more ways than one, related to what happened in the past and what happened when Europeans first started coming over to Canada, and how the First Nations people were treated and what happened to them. And I wasn't there, but there's a lot of history on that, and intuitively, like, or psychically, or whatever word you want to use, I do have a lot of awareness of more detailed things, because, you know, with spidey senses, you can gain awareness of anything at any time at a very personal level. And I just feel that what is happening now, if you were to look beyond the surface of the political, economical, whatever tension is happening right now, if you were to look deeper than that and go deeper with that, there's a lot of unhealed, unresolved pain and trauma that is, in my opinion, I feel that it's coming to the surface, and it's never been, a lot of it hasn't been resolved from when it happened. And I just feel that there's a lot of like, what's coming to me right now, what I'm seeing is that the First Nations people are saying to the Europeans, you owe us an apology. You did some very horrible things. So these are like the ancestors talking right now. These are the First Nations ancestors that are talking to the European ancestors. And they're saying, the First Nations people are saying, you owe us an apology, and we deserve an apology. And we never got, like, when it all happened, right? Like, there have been apologies, even in my lifetime, there have been apologies, and there have been, like, amends that have been tried to be made, and there have been efforts, but not with the people that it happened to way back when. And the Europeans should apologize, in my opinion. And I feel that, like, none of us were there, but we're all connected. We all come, not all of us, some of us are immigrants since then, but a lot of us a lot of us are descendants of Europeans who first came over and were the first immigrants to Canada. But there were people here already. There were original people here already. And it's kind of ironic just because, like, again, from what I've learned in history, about history, and what I've learned about Canadian history, is that, like, a lot of the first Europeans that came to Canada, they were not well-to-do themselves, and they had been treated horribly in their own countries, and they had been suppressed, and they had been abused, and they had been, like, they had really, really tough lives, and their ancestors had really tough lives. Like, I don't get the sense that it was high society people necessarily. Like, the bulk of the people coming over, I don't sense were the high society rich people, because they were well established throughout Europe already. I get the sense that it was the struggling people, the suppressed people, the, you know, people who were losing their land, the people that had no land, the people, like I'm getting, like, the poorest of the poor in a lot of cases. However, hurt people hurt people. And so what I'm getting is there was a lot of hurt people that were the first immigrants, and they were immigrants to Canada. But a lot of them were hurt people, and they were coming for a better life. But for whatever reason, they felt that they needed to take over. But, like, do you see the pattern here? Do you see the pattern of how in Europe, for centuries, that is what happened to them? For centuries, the people of the land had their land taken and became slaves of the land and no longer owned the land, and had the, like, they lost their land, they lost their livelihood, they became slaves or peasants of the higher powers that be, of the people in charge. That was what they learned. That was what they knew. That was intergenerational trauma that was embedded deeply into their mind, body, their minds and their bodies. And so then they come over to a new land in hopes of, like, not having that, but there were already people here. And I feel like what I'm being shown is that the first Europeans did the same thing to the First Nations people that the governments and the royalty and the conquerors did to them and their ancestors over in Europe. And so I always tell people, you can't change the past. The past is the past. I feel a little emotional about this. Like, there's just, like, so much pain attached to this. Like, it's almost like the Europeans that are connected here with me today are having the realization right now of, like, oh my God, we did the same thing to the First Nations people that you're, like, the conquerors of Europe and the royalty of Europe and the governments of Europe did to us. And they're just having, like, a holy shit moment right now. But try to get my train of thought back. Oh, you can't change the past, but you can heal the past. And when you work energetically and intuitively and psychically and whatever, you can bring awareness and you can acknowledge those first people, and you can reconnect with the past. That's what I'm trying to get at. You can reconnect with the past, and you can help the past heal. And that is what I'm feeling. And I'm actually seeing like so many people coming forward, so many European people coming forward right now, like ancestors, European ancestors. They're coming forward right now because the First Nations people are standing very strong, and they've had enough. They had enough a really long time ago. But they have had enough. And there is healing that needs to happen, or is meant to happen, or that is like kind of screaming right now to happen, because it's bubbling up to the surface, and it's causing tension throughout Canada right now, with all of these descendants on both sides, or from both cultures, or many cultures, that we're all descendants of the first immigrants and of the First Nations people that were already here. So initially, when I had my awareness coming through, or the visions coming through, the visuals coming through, it was a bit of a standoff, like a peaceful standoff, but it was a standoff where both sides were very firm with each other. But as my awareness, or as I'm becoming aware, and as the messages are coming through, I'm seeing a lot of the European ancestors. They're moving, they're walking, they're coming forward, and they're saying, like, we do owe them an apology, like from day one, like right from the get-go. And it's just that, like, if anything is ever going to truly heal here within Canada, and with the people, because do you see how, like, we're several generations down the line now, but the tension between Europeans and First Nations is still there, and it's still happening. And I just know without a doubt in my mind that it's connected to what never healed from the past, and what was never dealt with, and with the apologies that were never given when it happened. And so energetically, I am here as a voice for both sides. It's not, people are people. Like, I don't even like that there are sides, but these are sides right now. But I'm just here to represent all people and all sides, and show and share everything that's coming to me about the situation and about what happened, and it's like the truth. Like, I'm just here to do my best to share the truth, and share insights, and share perspectives that maybe, like, until right now, like, as this is coming through, I had never made the conscious realization that what Europeans did to the First Nations people of Canada was exactly the same thing as what happened to the Europeans in their own countries for centuries before they ever came here. Like, that blows my mind a little bit, to have that realization and to have that awareness come through. I never knew that. I never thought that thought before, but when things come to you, all of a sudden, you know more than you did before you tuned in. And so I see a lot of European people coming forward, having realizations. They're looking at their own ancestors. They're looking at their own families' trials and traumas from their own countries, and they're saying, holy shit, we did the same thing that was done to us. And they're taking ownership of that, and they're seeing that. And it's, again, like, we're all, none of us were there when all of that happened, and those generations of what happened, because there was multiple generations of not good things happening. Not just one generation of when people first came. Like, even when people got here, there was still generations of not good things happening. And I'm certain that even today there is still not good things happening between these two groups. And I just so much see it, though, as we're still living the effects of what didn't heal in the beginning, from the beginning, from every generation that came forth since, that never like resolved things and didn't heal things and didn't work through things. And it was like here doing this constantly because of perceived superiority or perceived entitlement or perceived whatever. And like sooner or later, suppressed people are gonna decide that they've had enough. But it's that, like, from the beginning they've had enough. They've had enough from the beginning, is the sense that I'm getting. And so you can't change the past, but you can go back to the past energetically and intuitively and psychically, and you can heal the past. And that is a very, very, very important thing that really needs to happen to help the situation of what's happening in our physical reality right now. So I'm just seeing that, like, because I'm from European descent, I don't feel that my role is to, like, I'm observing all the people in this visual, but because I'm from European descent, I feel as though respectfully, like in a respectful way, that I can share the messages, or that I can ask the European people if there's anything that they would like to to do today. Because I am connected to them and I came from them, and so I'm just offering to the European people, that the first immigrants, but then further down the line as well, basically, like, anyone that's on the other side that feels that they in some way mistreated the First Nations people, and not even maliciously, because a lot of what happened wasn't malicious. It wasn't with the intent to hurt anyone. It was just where their mindset was at, and where their thinking was at, and their beliefs about what they needed to do, or who they needed to be, or how it needed to happen, based on their own messed up past intergenerational traumas that they experienced in their own lives. And so I am extending an offer, or I am extending an invitation to any of the European people or descendants of the European people who are, now that they're on the other side, like, all the time, people are able to see things, or essences of people are able to see things in a different way than oftentimes what the human people of them knew and could see in their own lifetime. Things are a lot clearer over there, because I mentioned it before, but once you pass through the golden light, you're just love, light, and truth, and you are able to see a lot clearer, because you are clear. And you leave your baggage behind, but then your baggage is still here. But there's still, from what I've sensed and what I've learned these past few years of working in this way, is that there still has to be a willingness on the other side for those people to choose to deal with their energetic baggage that they did leave behind, and to make amends, or to resolve it, heal it, find peace with it, whatever. And so it's not like I can just say like, oh, well, blah, 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 and like every single person and whatever. It's like, no, I just extend the invitation. And I just share whatever I can, whatever comes through about the situation that like is coming into my awareness, as to what the truth is, and the story behind the story is, like, that caught, like, that's like a deeper cause of all of this. And then offer again, if anyone would like to make amends, or if anyone would like to express an apology to the people that they mistreated, or they abused, or they caused trauma to in their lifetimes, that they did not resolve and they did not make amends for in their lifetime. So I'm just extending that invitation. And there are definitely still people who are very not ready for that yet, but I also like to plant seeds, and if not today, then perhaps another day, and that is totally fine. I only work with people that are willing to work with me, and I only work with energies that are willing to work with me. And I do know, and I can feel it very strongly, that there is a lot of healing, energetic healing, that could be done and really should be done between the First Nations people and the European people. But what's coming to me today is just that, like, there's a lot of Europeans that at least owe an apology to the First Nations people for how they handled everything. And so I just see like a group forming, and it's interesting, like I actually see it forming like outside of the government buildings in Canada, and in Ottawa, sorry. And I see a big Canada flag. I got my Ottawa and Canada mixed up, but that's actually where I see all of these the essences of these people gathering is like outside of the main Parliament building with a giant Canada flag, because they're saying like, the thing that bonds all of us here is that we are all Canadians. Like we are all in this superimposed invisible border piece of land together, giant massive piece of land together. It's like we're all on this piece of land that we call Canada together. And that is what unifies all of us. It doesn't really matter what our differences are, or where we come from, or what our beliefs are, or what our religion is. Like, we are all living on this piece of land that has been named Canada. And so there is a very large group of people that is forming, and I'm just there could be more people that come, like after I'm done tuning in, there could be more people that come and or essences of people that come and go through this process. It's an apology process, because unless someone takes the first step to make amends, it's really, really hard for any amends to be made. And so I am offering or inviting the European people to take the first step to make amends, because had they never sailed over in their ships, and had they never stepped foot on the land that we call Canada, that was already had a lot of people living on it, this trauma wouldn't be there. This from Europeans, like they would have their own stuff from their own cultures and from their own lives and whatever, but there wouldn't be a whole bunch of trauma that was caused by Europeans and European descendants of Europeans. So it's almost like I am inviting the Europeans to take the first step with this, and to take the initiative to extend an honest, sincere apology to the First Nations people at an energetic level for what happened and for what they did and for how they treated the First Nations people and what they did to the First Nations people. And I just see it as energetically, I see it as a first step towards energetically healing a whole, like many mountains of trauma pebbles and wound pebbles and mistreatment pebbles. So I'm just giving them permission now that it's like, you are welcome to extend a heartfelt and sincere apology to the First Nations people, and say what you got to say, and share what you feel that you need to share in order to release the effects of what you've done from your end. Like whenever there's a conflict, there's two groups involved at least. But if one group or one person from one group chooses to make amends and to do whatever they can to like apologize or to like deal with and take ownership of what they said or what they did or what happened, and like deal with that, it's almost like they're clearing the energy of it. They're clearing their end of it from what they did, and they're healing that and acknowledging it. Like healing needs acknowledgement. And so what I'm seeing is like there are a lot of Europeans and European descendants who are coming forward to say, you know what, like we realize now that wasn't right, and we said or did things that weren't right and that were disrespectful and hurtful and traumatic, and like the list goes on, and they're apologizing for it. And it's like they're collecting their shit. They're gathering up their shit and they're gathering up their shittiness, and they are like releasing it from their end. That doesn't mean that the First Nations, like I don't feel as though it's up to me to know how the First Nations people will respond to that or how they will receive it or not. But I just feel that like my role in this today is to be a witness and be a messenger of the European perspective and the European connection to that conflict and the past between them. And so I'm just gonna ask, like, so this, I feel, because of how many people energetically gathered today, I'm getting like on Parliament Hill, like it's actually very, like, I feel like there's a lot of symbolism there for where they wanted to gather. But that process is gonna go on energetically for a bit. It's just like maybe even a few days, like I don't know, like there's no time on the other side. There's just like space and action, basically. And movement. But I have helped create awareness of what's happening, and maybe I've been a catalyst for it, and maybe I've helped to set it up. And I'm being told, like, don't say maybe, say what's true, which I am. Like, I am that. I am a catalyst, and I am helping set this up, and I am coordinating this process and this energetic healing efforts. Like, they are efforts. Like, they are putting the effort in to do what they can at their level to make amends and to clear their end of the shit show that happened. So I just see the First Nations people standing there, and I see the First Nations people observing it, but it's not for me to, it's not for me to express what is happening or what they're thinking or any of that. This was like, I'm very respectful of where the open doors are and where the open doors are not, and they're allowing me to see them, but I am respectful that at this time they don't really want me to share what this all means to them. But it's very open from the European side, and just like, it's very clear, and it's very like that those messages are coming through, and the visuals are coming through very clearly. And I just feel that like even those of us who are here now, physically here now, it's almost like having the awareness that whether we have done anything directly or not to any other person, or if we feel that perhaps somewhere down the line of our own family history, it is possible that someone said or did something that was not okay to someone else of a different culture, of a different ethnic background, or of the like, did something not okay to First Nations people. It's almost like we can take ownership for our ancestors, and we can take ownership for what they might have said, or what they might have done, or how they might have, like, whatever in their own lifetime, whether you're intuitive or psychic or not, it doesn't really matter. Like, just like, ponder, is it possible that someone in my family tree said or did something to someone at some point in their life that maybe wasn't the best, and maybe wasn't super nice, and could I initiate the healing of that? Could I initiate taking ownership for my ancestors, and almost like giving them permission to make it right. Because unless someone from this side, from the physical, initiates it to help the energetic, they're stuck over there. They can't do it unless it's initiated from here, unless we initiate it for them. So if you're listening to this and it's what I'm saying is making sense and the wheels are kind of turning here, that is something that each one of us could do. Is just like, it doesn't matter who it was done to. It doesn't matter what happened. The details don't even matter. It's just asking the question, is it possible that someone in my family tree at some point of time wronged someone in some way? And is it maybe time to like take ownership of that and give permission for my own ancestors to apologize and to collect, to free the energy from their end and take ownership of what they did, so that it at least gives the person that they did it to the opportunity to heal. Because unless someone takes the first step, it's very hard to heal. And I feel like there's a lot of ownership that could be taken from all of the stuff from the past. Even though we maybe aren't doing it ourselves today, a lot of us are descendants of the people who did do it. And I think that is an important awareness to have. And I think it's also very important that we know that there's a lot of not okay stuff that happened. And just helping understand why there's tension now. It's really not rocket science to me. It's like very obvious to me. There's a lot of wrongs that have never been made right, and with people who've been deceased for a really long time, but you've got to go back there and make it right. You can't change it, but you can make it right. So can't change what happened, but you can do your best to make it right. So okay, I'm going to leave it at that for today. So thank you so much for being here with me and for tuning in as I tuned in. And I just want to say thank you. And I'm sure I will be on here again very soon. So bye for now.